Please sit down. So it's been a long gap, hasn't it, since the last time we met this Saturday. So it's really nice to see everybody again. And in fact, quite a few people have been here before. So welcome everyone. And welcome everyone who's live streaming. Is there anybody live streaming? Mm-hmm. Great. So this afternoon I'm going to talk about the story of the shepherd boy. Just to be it. Right, okay. So I've given it to you because I'm going to be referring to it, and you'll get a bit frustrated if you think, what is the story of the shepherd boy? And I can tell it to you briefly, so you've got a sort of feel for it. But at least then when you go home, you can kind of look at it and think, oh yes, this is what she was talking about. So we'll begin by calling on Milarepa and pointing at this image here, which is the iconographical form of Milarepa. For those of you, does anybody not know who Milarepa is? Maybe? He's famous, spread far and wide. You know who he is. You have a very strong connection with Milarepa in this Sangha, especially because Khenpo Rinpoche, this is Khenpo Rinpoche here, for the last decade or two of his teaching life, he very much concentrated on the songs of Milarepa and was always getting us to sing them and getting us to tell the stories and act out the stories and learn the songs by heart, and for it to be the practice that we did when we came together as a group. And we've been doing that recently in Nepal, in Tekchokling, with people from all over the world, from east and west, from Taiwan, Malaysia, America, South America, Europe, all the different European countries. So it's been really a wonderful sense of connection with Milarepa and his lineage. And Khenpo Rinpoche himself is a great singer of songs, so when you go to see him for teaching or advice or something, it'd be very typical for him to sing spontaneously, create a song that you could then, you could record it these days and you take away and learn it, and that would be your special instruction from Rinpoche. So this is this conjures up the tradition of the lineage of Milarepa, Kagyu lineage of Milarepa. So I hope you can get a sense of the atmosphere of practicing the yogic tradition of Milarepa. You notice he's not a monk. He's a yogin with hasn't shaved his hair. He isn't actually wearing much. In fact, quite often he didn't wear anything. It was quite shocking from the social point of view. But that suited him because he just wanted to demonstrate the life of a wandering yogin who needed nothing, who just lived in the mountains, didn't even bother with food sometimes, certainly didn't bother with clothing. So he was quite a wild figure, and a great favourite among all the Tibetan Buddhist lineages. And now I think he's got worldwide fame. He's famous for his songs. So we'll begin by singing a verse that Khenpo Rinpoche composed at the beginning of his song, The Auspiciousness That Lights Up the Universe, which is on page...
The indication is on page A21.
A21.
The books. The invocation.
Guru Hasa Vajra Ye.
Thank you.
Yes. You see that everything in samsara nirvana is merely dependently arisen. You see the Dharma of true being, that is the essence of all dependent arising. The power of your great insight fills the universe with auspicious light. Almighty Shepherd Dorje, please rise up now from within my heart. You see that everything in samsara and nirvana is merely dependently arisen. You see the avatar of true being, that is the essence of all dependent arising. The power of your great insight fills the universe with auspicious light. Almighty Shepherd Dorje, please rise up now from within my heart. You see that everything in samsara and nirvana is merely dependently arisen. You see the Dharma of true being, that is the essence of all dependent arising. The power of your great insight fills the universe with auspicious light. Almighty Shepherd Dorje, please rise up now from within my heart. Jimila Shepherd Dorje la soadeso. 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 Lord Mila laughing Vajra, I call to you. 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 So I was asked to give some teaching on progressive stages of meditation on emptiness at the retreat of Rinpoche's students in Tekchokling in Kathmandu, Nepal this year. And are you all familiar with that small book of teaching of progressive stages of meditation on emptiness by Sitting Council? Anyone not familiar? All right, I'm going to tell some people. Okay, so that's a book that of a set of teachings that Khenpo Rinpoche came when he first came to the West, and he taught about emptiness, and he taught about it in, as you would guess from the title, stages of understanding it on progressively deeper levels of meaning. And he gives this book to people when they want to become his students, and he says, go away and meditate on this for a few years basically. And it was actually put together by myself when I was, about 30, I think. A long time ago now, nearly 40 years ago. And it's been translated into many languages, including back into Hindi, and they even want to translate it back into Tibetan, but it's not going to work. Nepali, but it's been. I think it's a measure of the impact of Rinpoche's approach to the study of emptiness and study generally, that he's condensed a lot of Buddhist philosophy down into stages of meditation. Like, it's not in the head, it's actually to be meditated on. And so when I look at it, I think, well, I wouldn't start there, actually. I think you need a lot more, to do quite a lot more work before moving on to that, even though obviously it's not a bad idea to start there. I mean, he started there and here we all are. So anyway, when I thought about it, I thought I've got 4 talks and I've got to cover this whole, condense what is already very condensed. So what am I going to do to give people something that's worth having, especially since most of them have studied this text for years? So, what can I do that would be worth doing together? And I thought, I think I'll focus it around the story of the shepherd, the Milarepa story of the shepherd, because as it happens, Rinpoche mentions the shepherd, that Milarepa teaches emptiness to the shepherd. Actually, he doesn't mention emptiness in the story of the shepherd, but he does once say that he's talking about the not self of the person, which is the first stage in the progressive meditation of meditation on emptiness, is the not self view. I think most people who come into Buddhism these days have heard of Buddhism teaches about no self or not self or non-self or something about that. And this is it's problematic in many ways. So I found it very interesting to see that Milarepa didn't really talk about self very much, especially in this story. He keeps to language that's very common sense. And I think that's the great power of the story, that it's a young shepherd boy. He's not an educated person. And he's come to, he happens upon Milarepa. He's out with his friend. He's not actually looking for teaching. He's not even looking for Milarepa. He doesn't even know he's talking to Milarepa, who's already a very famous yogin. So it's got a kind of freshness about it that we can really identify with, because it's us. It's us encountering our own mind, if you like. And I want to encourage you to approach it in that way, not so much as a kind of, this is a philosophical view about there's no self. What does self mean, and what does no self mean? It's more like very simple questions that you might be asking yourself anyway, but you never did it in a systematic way, and you never had anybody there to, in a sense, bounce off. You might ask yourself questions like, I wonder what my mind is, and then you drift off because you're not expecting an answer from someone else. I wonder what my mind is. Oh, yeah, that's a funny question. And then you go off and think about something else. Whereas actually in the story of the shepherd, you can see how Milarepa takes that examination, not examination really, just that question, what is the mind? And he helps the shepherd to engage with that, and then sets him on his way, which is that's a great story, just in those 2 sentences. So, in a way, this story of the shepherd boy condenses all the stages of the five stages of progressive stages of meditation on emptiness into one conversation, well, one series of conversations. And for those people who've not been introduced to this topic before, I hope it will be an engaging story and get you going a bit. And for those people who have thought about it a lot, I think some very interesting points come out of this story. So I think maybe the best thing is for us to read it so that we all know what the story is. So, does anybody feel like reading it? Who likes reading? You can't all read it. No, they can't have everybody.
Helpful if you did it.
Because I'm in front of the camera. Okay, I'll read it.
And also, if you could remind them that they can download the story from the link underneath the screen.
So underneath the screen, there's a link. So if you want to download the story, you can download it, and then you've got it too. Okay. The shepherd's search for mind. One day, 2 young shepherds came to see Jetson Milarepa. The younger one asked, "Lama, don't you have a companion?" Milarepa replied, "I do." "What's he called?" "He's someone called Friend Bodhimind." Or Bodhicitta even. Well, where is he now? Right now, he's in the house of the Arya Vijnana. What are you calling house of the Arya Vijnana? It's my own body. The elder boy then said, "Lama, you're no refuge, I'm going." But the younger one said, "Are you saying Vijnana is mind and the body is the house of the mind?" "That's right." The boy continued, "We know that although a house usually belongs to one person, many people can enter it. In the same way, is there only one mind in the body, or can there be many?" "If there can be many, how would that be?" Milarepa replied, "As to whether it's one or many, you look for yourself." The young man said, "Very well," and the 2 of them took their leave. We'll come back to this. There's many things to be said about that little conversation. Okay, next morning, the younger boy returned and said to Milarepa, "Lama, last night I tried to find out what my mind is and what it's like. I observed it carefully and found out that I have only one mind. Even though one wants to, one cannot kill this mind. However much one wishes to send it away, it will not go. If one tries to catch it, it cannot be grasped or pinned down. If you want it to remain, it will not stay. If you release it, it will not go. You try to gather it, it cannot be picked up. You try to see it, it cannot be seen. You try to understand it, it cannot be known. If you think it is an existing entity and try to cast it off, it will not leave you. If you think that it is non-existent, you feel it running on. It's something illuminating, aware, wide awake, yet incomprehensible. It's short. It's hard to say what the mind is, really. I beg you, Lama, to reveal to me what it is." In response, Milarepa sang, and I think there's a new version of that song, which you don't have online, but I'm going to read it out, and it will be available. Listen, shepherd boy, you'll never taste the sweetness of sugar from listening to someone else describing it. You might imagine it, but not actually taste it. It is your own tongue that needs to experience the taste for itself. It's like that with the true nature or essence of mind. Another person can point it out so you get a glimpse of it, but that is not what it is to really see it. Based on that glimpse, you have to really search for it. Then, for sure, you will see it. So, shepherd boy, that is what you've got to do if you want to know your own mind. Okay, so then the boy then said, in that case, please give me instruction that points it out, and this evening I will look. I shall return tomorrow and tell you the result. Milarepa replied, very well. When you get home, look for the colour of the mind. Is it white, red, or what? What is its shape? Is it oblong, round, or what? Also, try to locate where in your body it is. The next morning, as the sun rose, driving the sheep before him, the shepherd came to Milarepa, who asked, did you try last night to find out what the mind is like? The boy replied, yes, I did. What did you find? Well, it is clear, vivid, and here's a mistake. It isn't unmoving, it's moving. So you need to change that in the text. I mean, it's obvious, isn't it? It's moving. And ungraspable. It has no colour or shape. When it links with the eyes, it sees. When with the ears, it hears. When with the nose, it smells. When with the tongue, it tastes and talks. When with the feet, it walks. If the body is agitated, the mind, too, is stirred up. Normally, the mind directs the body. When the body is in good condition, the mind can command it at will. But when the body becomes old, decayed, or bereft, the mind will leave it behind without a thought, as one throws away a stone after cleaning oneself. On the other hand, the body does not remain quiet and submissive, but frequently gives trouble to the mind. It causes suffering and pain until the mind loses its self-control. At night, in the state of sleep, the mind goes away. It is indeed very busy and hard-working. It causes me no end of suffering. The Jetson then sang, at the separation of awareness and the physical body, Vijnana is the great culprit. It is the cause of having to experience the suffering of the lower realms of samsara. Do you want to abandon samsara by turning around and going to the land of the higher realms in liberation? If you want to go, I will guide you. The shepherd begged him to do so. Milarepa then asked, what is your name? Sanjay. How old are you? 16. Thereupon, the Jetson gave him the refuge transmission, explaining briefly its benefits. He then said, from now on, ceaselessly take refuge, and this evening, try to find out which is Kya, or Kyapa. And that's his name, Sanjay Kya. The mind or the body? Tell me the result tomorrow. The next morning the shepherd came and said to Milarepa, dear Lama, last night I tried to find out which is Kyapa, the body or the mind. I found out that neither of them is. It can't be the body, because from the head down to the toes, each part has its own name, so it isn't called Kyapa. But when I ask myself if it's the body as a whole, it can't be, because when the mind leaves the body, it's just called a corpse. It no longer goes by the name of Kyapa. Furthermore, when it's burnt to ashes and dispersed, it's not even called a corpse. If you look to see if Kyab is the mind, to call what is called Kyab mind doesn't make sense. And it doesn't make sense to call what is called mind Kyab either. If you call the former mind mind and the following mind Kyab, then because the former and the following minds that were present at the time of calling it Kyab are finished, you would have to also call the present and the future minds the name Kyab. If the former and following minds are all labelled Kyab, then because the mind is not of the nature of something that dies, former and following births in the 6 realms are all Kyab. But I cannot remember what I did in former lives and don't know what I will do in following lives. And even last year's and yesterday's minds and so on are past and gone. Future minds have not yet come, and present minds successively pass away. So Lama, please tell me, Lama. Lama, you know, so please tell me. I want to know. In answer to this request, Milarepa sang, and I think I've got another translation of that one. Did you just give it to me? Oh no.
I gave you something that says, please print off a copy for me.
That'll be it. That'll be it. I want it. Here it is. So it's an alternative translation. Lama, who has realized the nature of mind and of what is not self, we pray to you with deep respect with our body, speech and mind. Please bless me and my disciples who follow me, so that we realize the nature of not self. Hold us in your compassion that we escape the country of self-clinging. Listen, shepherd boy. This Vijnana that clings to me as self, if you look at it, you don't find anything. But if you can meditate on Mahamudra, you will see something in a non-seeing way. In order to meditate on Mahamudra, you need as a basis great faith, humility, and application. The path requires you to take care of the causes and fruits of karmic action in samsara. For the fruit to reveal itself, you need the Lama's empowerment and pith instructions. A fit vessel for pith instructions is a student with a lot of punya, able to support extremes of happiness and suffering. It requires a student who doesn't care if he dies in the process, who won't give up even at the cost of his life. Young man, can you do that? If you can, you have fortunate karma. If you can't, then there's no point in explaining further. This Vijnana clinging to me as self that you were pondering and not finding is known as the not self of the person. If you want to know the not self of the Dharmas, you'll have to follow me for 12 years, and then you will come to recognize your mind. Think about it, young man. There's a lot to comment upon that. I think there's a bit more, isn't there, the story? Okay. The shepherd said, I offer you my body and my head. Please make me understand my own mind definitely and clearly. The Jetson thought, I shall see if this child can really practice. And then he said, first pray to the 3 precious ones, then visualize an image of Buddha in front of your nose. And thus Milarepa gave the shepherd the instruction of concentration and sent him away. So I won't read the rest of the story because you've got it there. And it's quite fun because he goes off to meditate and loses all sense of time, and sort of causes his family grief really, because he's now useless as a shepherd because he goes off with the sheep, and then he thinks he's sat down for 5 minutes to meditate, and actually he's been there 5 days, so not really very good. So they suggest to him, well, would you like to go and stay permanently with Milarepa? And he says, oh yeah, you bet. So they gather lots of things together for his sustenance, as it were, and they take him off to Milarepa, who accepts him. And then there's a further conversation, and he then becomes his disciple and ends up being one of his heart sons, one of his close disciples with a high realization. So you could say it has a happy ending. But this young shepherd is actually a very gifted practitioner. So that the main thing I wanted to draw your attention to is the way Milarepa is talking to him about the nature of mind, the way he's leading him by asking him very simple questions. And you've got a very good example in the first part where Milarepa is being a bit enigmatic, talking about bodhicitta and talking about Alaya Vijnana and his body as a house and so on. And the elder of the two shepherds says, what are you talking about? Come on, let's go. This isn't what we've come to see the Lama for. We've come for refuge. We've come for a blessing. We've come for some kind of teaching that we can relate to. And he clearly can't relate to this as a teaching that means anything to him. He doesn't know how to engage with it. I found that very significant. And the younger one is intrigued. He immediately starts asking him questions, trying to, he's assuming that he's making some kind of sense. And he's coming up with suggestions of what Milarepa might mean. So he's really himself making the effort. He's really engaging. He isn't just expecting the Lama to just, do all the work. He's quite prepared to engage and quite confident, like, well, what do you mean? Do you mean this? Do you mean that? So he's not kind of, supposed to be very, very humble in front of the Lama. He's kind of quite feisty and wants to know. And I think that's a really important point, the kind of confidence it takes to ask when you don't understand. Not to think, either, well, this isn't for me, or it's kind of beyond me, let's go. And turning away, which we do in various ways, even if we don't do it physically. I think mentally it's very, and emotionally it's very easy to do that when you hear some kind of obscure teaching. So I think there's already a lesson in that, the way the Sanji chap actually is so open with Milarepa and so willing to engage. It's a little bit obscure, this bit about the body and the Alaya Vijnana. I certainly struggled with it. I need to ask one of the Kempos to explain what he thinks it means. But I think it's clear enough for the story to flow all right. But he does make this interesting remark. Look what. There's Milarepa sitting out on the mountainside with nothing and nobody anywhere. And these two shepherds come along, well, what are you doing here? Are you on your own? Is there anyone with you? Yes. Where? Kind of doesn't make sense. And then this sense of Milarepa, the only companionship he needs is the companionship of the bodhicitta, the true nature of his own heart and mind. That's company enough. And where is it? It's in his, this body where I am. This is it. And then he brings in this Alaya Vijnana business, and I keep all the way through. I've translated this, what in Tibetan is Namshe, as back into Sanskrit, which is Vijnana, which normally is translated in English as consciousness. I usually translate it as consciousness, but consciousness in English could be anything, the same as awareness could be, or mind could be anything. But it's a specific kind of mind, if you like. It's the mind, I suppose, those people who use that term, sort of the dualistic mind, the mind that splits into a strong sense of subject and object, that this is the mind here which sees the object there, and that is the way we talk and more or less experience our lives, isn't it? There's the world out there and the mind in here somehow. It's a very standard way of thinking about our experience, and yet that actually turns out to be false in some way. But exactly how it's false is quite tricky. You know, if you just try to think, oh, I see, so that's false, it's all one. There's just another idea, it's another version of the same kind of thing. You know, I'm having this idea that it's all like that. And, you know, sometimes that kind of might be quite helpful, but sometimes it just doesn't make any sense at all, and most of the time you don't think about it at all. It's not really what you're experiencing, it's more like a theory about what you're experiencing. So that mind that does that, that turns everything into some kind of heavy conceptual structure that complicates your experience and the way you think and the way you experience the world, is called Vijnana. And I don't know if it helps to call it consciousness, because you can be conscious without it being Vijnana, because consciousness doesn't have the meaning, the same meaning as Vijnana. So why not have a technical word? Because what's quite interesting is, although Milarepa's using it, the shepherd boy isn't. And Milarepa's going along with the words and the way the shepherd boy is naturally thinking. He's not telling him to change the words he's using or the way he's thinking. In fact, if you look at the responses of the shepherd boy, he seems to be giving very clever answers in some ways. You know, he seems to have noticed lots of things about his mind. But at the end of telling Milarepa what he's found, he just says, "Help! I can't understand it at all. I have no idea." And that's really what Milarepa's listening out for. And that's when he gives him the next instruction, as it were. So I think there's a lot to be learnt from that as well. That, like the shepherd, when we're given something when you're trying to see the nature of the mind or trying to pursue some simple question like, well, you know, where is the mind, or what is the mind like? It's very frustrating because you can't find it. And yet if you just say, oh, well, I can't find it, that's the answer, well, you haven't, nothing's happened. You're just kind of the same as you were before. So that you have to, on the one hand, engage with the question and then be able to, in a sense, bear the fact that you can't answer it. You know, you've got to kind of to the uncomfortableness of, well, if I don't understand what my own mind is, what do I understand? You know, maybe nothing. Well, what's the significance of that? It's like having the rug pulled from underneath you. And that's why it's really important when you're doing this kind of examination to have somebody there that you have faith in who can actually help you through that. And in this is what Milarepa says, you know, you need to have somebody can point it out to you, you have to look, but then you need that person there, in a sense, for you to take that further, to have that, to affirm that recognition and to hold you with that and give you the support you need with that. He calls it, towards the end, he talks about it, well, if you want to go even further, now you need an empowerment. First you need the pointing out instruction, then you need the empowerment, you need to have faith, you need to have humility. This is going to be difficult. It's going to take, 12 years at least, and this is a very promising student. So I think that contrast between okay, you have the confidence to look and engage in your own way. You're doing it with somebody that you have confidence in. You arrive at a point where you realize what it means to not know. Like, help, I don't know. And then you need that somebody who can take you deeper into that, and in a sense has the capacity to empower and to support you, and you need the qualities necessary in order to go further, and then it's going to be a long journey. In a sense, the glimpse can come quite quickly, but the rest of the journey is going to take a long time, even for a very gifted student. But the good news is that during that long journey, it isn't all misery. You know, although he says you have to bear hardship and so on, in fact, all along the way, you're getting that sense of inspiration and support, and even one might say a sense of liberation, the taste of liberation coming from the practice that you're doing, so that you're always have that sense of inspiration of being on the path, even though it's going to take a long time. So Ken Rinpoche used to laugh. He'd say, well, yes, it does take a long time, but you don't mind because you're happy, which is kind of encouraging. So if we now look more closely at the boy's first response to being told, well, you know, my companion is my bodhi, my awakened heart, my bodhi heart, and it's in my body. So the boy starts straight away to think about it. My mind is in my body. But actually, when you look at your mind, you think it's in the body, you know, you think, why would you start talking about, are there more than one mind? But actually, you know, how much of the time do we spend talking to ourselves? How many different voices appear in our minds? You know, the one that wants this, and the one that wants that, and the one that thinks this, and the one that thinks that. And they're arguing with each other, they're conflicting with each other, they're kind of overriding each other. It is like there's a whole committee of people, you might say, a whole gang of different characters that come in and out of our minds. It's sort of loosely speaking, you know, when you're in a good mood, or then when you're angry with someone, then you're cross with yourself for being cross. And then there's the story you tell yourself about all of that. How many minds are there? Are they each a different mind? We don't really, it's not really clear cut, is it? Are we just one mind? Or is the mind just one overall mind that these are all emanating from? Or are they all different separate minds and there isn't a central mind? What do we mean by mind? It's our mind that's the problem, isn't it? You know, if our mind was totally happy and content, nothing else would matter, would it? So, well, that's all right. Doesn't really matter what happens because I feel totally content and happy. Is that just one mind? Or is it happy minds that keep coming up? And is there one overall mind? And that's a question, in a sense, we can answer ourselves. And it's interesting that the first question that he answers He says, I looked and I only have one mind. And Milarepa doesn't argue with it. I only have one mind. It's like each one of us has to kind of look for ourselves and to see, is that true? When I say mind, what do I mean? What matters to me about mind? Why does mind matter to me? Like if you were offered a transplant, maybe your body was completely broken up and you were offered a transplant of your mind into another body. Would you say yes to it? What would you be wondering about? I know I would be wondering, but would it still be my mind if it was in another person's brain? Would it still be me? Would it be my mind? And if someone were to say, well, you're different every moment anyway, so it's not going to make any difference. Is it going to not make any difference? If that were really true, then why do we do anything in life? Because it's no real, there's nothing real about anything, really. It's all random, moment by moment, bits of mind floating about. But actually, what gives our life meaning is a sense of, there's a central character there. And, okay, there's different expressions of it, but basically, somehow there's one mind. I was thinking about this a lot in retreat. But you can't say it's meaningless. When I meet somebody and I love somebody, I care about somebody, it's because they are one person. I don't think, oh, well, the person they were a moment ago is gone, so this person that's here now is hardly here long enough to bother about. I definitely sense that there's something very meaningful about each and every person, actually. And they're one. But so like Sanjit Jam, there can only be one. But what on earth could it be? So then he goes on to think, well, okay. Yeah, interesting, the first thing he says is, even if you want to kill it, you can't. Which I don't think, you were a bit sophisticated, I think, in the West now, and we would think, well, you can kill the mind. But we can't really say that because we don't really know what the mind is. You'd have to know what the mind was to know whether you'd killed it or not, wouldn't you? So, but what comes to my mind is this idea of killing yourself. When things get really, really tough and you think, oh, I think I'll kill myself. And I think what's the name of that person who went through the life of Tolle? What's his name? What's his name? Eckhart Tolle. He had this great breakthrough when he was contemplating killing himself, and he realized, but which one's me? The one that's doing the killing, because they'll still be there, or the one that's been killed? How do I know that actually the one doing the killing isn't really me and therefore will still be there, having killed something else I've called me, which is, I think this is what Sanji Chap is saying. You know, if you tried to kill yourself, you would be there killing yourself, so you would still be there. But this is also something that's not taken as given, I think, in the West these days, that you can't kill the mind, because we don't really have a very clear idea what mind is. So, but people like to think, well, obviously when the body dies, the mind dies. And there's nothing obvious about it, because you haven't, all you know is that the mind isn't moving the body about anymore. It isn't animating the body, but you don't really know what the mind is. You never did know what the mind was. So just to think, okay, well, because it's not moving the body around anymore, it must have gone. It must be, you know, finished. There's no reason to think that. And I find it really interesting when you hear these terrible cases of what they call it, locked-in syndrome, where they think there isn't any mind there because there's nothing happening in the body, and then they find that there is a mind there. And not only is the mind there, but it's actually the whole person is there. It's kind of, oh wow, kind of a big message there. So there's a lot to think about here, because this really does strike to the heart of what the Dharma is about. The Dharma is about liberating the person. The person is trapped in thinking it's something that it isn't, and it's suffering from that. But then what is the person? What is the mind? What are we then, if we're not what we thought we were? So this is the story of Sanji Chap. Try to send it away. You know, you've had enough of it. Okay, that's enough. Stop. It doesn't stop, does it? In fact, if you try to stop the mind, has anyone ever tried to stop their mind or stop themselves thinking something? It just thinks more and more and more, doesn't it? Try and stop it. Try to catch it. You can't grasp it. You can't pin it down. If you think it's, you know, you think, okay, there's only one mind. You can't say there's one mind because you don't know what the mind is. But then it can't not be one mind, because it wouldn't make any sense for there to be more than one. So anything you say about it, you can question again. And yet at the same time, there's some kind of certainty within yourself that you're talking about or thinking about something that is extremely important and you care about a lot. If you want it to remain, it won't stay. If you let it go, if you sort of think, okay, you can go now, it's still there. You try to gather it, gather it together. You still don't know whether it's there or not. Try to see it, but of course, by nature, you can't see it. When you think about it, when you say you see something or you know something, you're taking something as an object, aren't you? There's something there. There's something called my mind there. But in order to know it, that's the mind to know it. So the mind that knows the mind is always one step removed from the mind, because the mind is what is doing the knowing. Which, I don't know, does that seem obvious to you? Fairly obvious? Do anyone want to question that? Mind is doing the knowing. And if it's created something that it knows, that's not itself, is it? It's something it knows. So how is it ever going to know itself?
You could see that an eye can't see itself because it's doing the looking, but you can get a mirror and look at your eye this
Mm-hmm.
way.
So who's seeing it? What's seeing it?
Still the eye.
The eye is seeing?
Or in the example, if you want to see an eye,
Yeah.
you don't ever see it directly.
Yeah.
You put a mirror in front of you. It's
Uh-huh.
still the eye doing the looking,
Yeah.
but it's reflected.
Yeah.
You could say it's not direct.
Well, it's seeing the outside of your eye that isn't the seeing part, isn't it? It's not seeing the seer.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you talk about mind, no, you
Yeah.
can't see the seer. Oh, you can't see the seeing.
Yeah.
In a sense, yeah.
Yeah. So how do you know it, and what is it?
Do you have to have a knower just because you got knowing?
Well, this is what you need to look for experientially, really, don't you? Do you have to?
Well, do you logically?
Well, in a way, you could say logically, but then that's creating a logical system of some sort, isn't it? But if you look at your experience and you think, okay, there's knowing, is there a knower? In a way, you can only experience it, can't you?
Just because you believe something doesn't mean it's real.
No.
Just because if there's an experience of knowing
Mm.
and we believe there's a knower, it doesn't mean
That's
even
right.
though it's really intuitive, it doesn't mean that's so.
That's right. But what is so? The only way you know what is so is by staying with the experience, isn't it? So you're not trying to prove anything particularly, you're just trying to see what is that experience then. Because always, even if there's knowing, there's always a kind of play going on, isn't there, between knowing and the thing that's known. They're not the same thing. I guess there's my hand, for example, and knowing my hand. My hand, without my knowing it, is not the same thing as knowing it, is it?
It's the hand knowing the hand.
But if that were the case, you would have passed outside of the usual use of language, wouldn't you? Because normally speaking, you're now using language in a special way if you're trying to say the hand can know itself. Logically, the way we use language, that's not logical.
But language is constructed around subject and object, which is a reflection of seeing things in a particular way. So language is always going to do that.
That's right. And so we're talking about experiencing that and becoming really clear about that and going.
I think there's a way of knowing, knowing experience. There's a way of understanding or knowing without necessarily.
Which is very strange.
A knower, I think.
That's very strange, isn't it?
Yeah.
So this is what, in a way, this is what we're trying to. Each person for himself has to find that strange place, which is why Milarepa then goes straight into saying the sugar. People can talk to you about the sugar. People can say to you, "There's another way of knowing," but you've got to find it yourself, haven't you? You're right. You could say, "Well, there is this other way of knowing. The way we think we know things isn't how it is," but that's just not going to help you till you actually taste that yourself. Does that make sense?
Yes, it probably depends on how you define what the knowing means, because it can mean knowing something can mean that you conceptually grasp it in some way, and this will close it, and it might be some sort of objectify it. But you can know things intuitively, just by intuition, and
That's right.
you can see things without analyzing them at all, and that's into knowing.
And that's what Milarepa is talking about when he says you have to taste it yourself. It's the language isn't going to get you there.
Yeah.
So other people can talk about this, but you have to find it. And if you go too quickly with it and you think, oh well, I see, there's another way, it isn't enough. You've kind of close things down a bit, because it is actually very strange and not what we normally are experiencing. So you get a bit of a taste of, hang on, that's a bit odd. And then actually this is where the formless meditation comes in, where you just stay with that. Stay with it, stay with it, stay with it, watching the mind fly back to its old habits, come back, flies off to its old habits, come back. And then as that starts to stabilize, the taste of sugar starts to come through. But you have to do it yourself. It's no use somebody telling you, well, it's like that. And you have to approach it not with a theory, but in a very naive way, like he's doing. He's approaching it in a very naive way. Well,
Is it beyond thought?
well, yes. I mean, you can say all these things. You say it's beyond thought, but
It's almost unsayable, isn't it?
But you've got to experience that, haven't you? You've got to experience what that is. What's the taste of that, really? That's why in a way, you can hear the answer, but it doesn't really tell you the answer. It's like, what's the taste of sugar? Sweet. Oh, okay, well, I know the taste of sugar. That's that done. But you haven't even begun to find out what the taste of sugar is. By being told it's sweet, or told it's beyond thought, or something like that, it doesn't really tell you, does it? You have to, and then gradually you taste it, what the sweet is. And the same with, if you like, beyond thought, inverted commas, or non-duality, or not self, or something like that. You can be told it, you can believe it, you can have theories about it, but still, that's not the same as tasting it. Does that make sense?
Yes, this story, to be honest, reminds me of words which Ludwig Wittgenstein expressed. They
Right.
said, where one cannot speak, it has to remain silent. So it's like that. You create. The boy asked the yogin in something in a language, and they already created some sort of unsolvable problem where they can't really express that what they are talking about. And to really understand what it is, they just need to go through some sort of experience. They can't talk really, they can't talk it through.
It's interesting that you can say that. Nonetheless, we can use a lot of words to point.
Yeah.
So it's like you use a lot of words to point, but unless anybody is making the leap, that image of the pointing a finger at the moon, somebody can be pointing at the moon from there, somebody can be pointing at the moon from there, somebody can be pointing at the moon from there. They're all pointing in different directions. Actually, they are all pointing at the moon, but you have to make the leap from the fingertip to what on earth it means to point. Then
I think that pointing is why songs can substitute in a way that ordinary talking about things doesn't.
Well, they can. Ordinary talking can, and as you say, songs can, physical movements can, symbols can, rituals can.
It's a sort of pointing.
They all can point. They can all point, but we have to do the work. That movement from the indication to the understanding is all our own, isn't it?
Or is it?
I mean, how do you do it?
Volitional thing.
How do you do it? I mean, when somebody points, when somebody points at the moon, how do you do it? How do you take that and make the right movement? It's kind of quite amazing, isn't it? And the whole of the path is like that, really. You find, as you say, you find yourself making these movements almost like intuitively, and realizing something that you can talk about, but the other person has to do the key
I'm
thing.
not sure about the volition behind the key thing, I suppose. You know, it's not like somebody can decide that they're, you know, it's like.
It's an interesting area, isn't it? Between, because if we couldn't actually kind of play, and there wasn't any room for play, or then we wouldn't realize anything. But then if we're too heavy-handed, we just break everything that we touch. So there's, and which are you going to call volition? I mean, you've got the one word that in a sense has to do both, doesn't it? I mean, you could change it to intuition or something like that. But
You know, the talking, the stories, and the songs, and the whole dialogue here plays more sort of destructive role to a kind of like break down the concepts which boy kind of gets on its way, but it's still not there, and he gets rid of his old concepts until he really experiences that what you know, he may have some sort of idea, but it's still not there. He didn't see it in a sense that he didn't you know, experience it in its full richness and full extent. And this way, it is pointing, but it is a sort of destructive and negative way.
It is. But what's interesting is that the boy arrives at that place of completely all his concepts breaking down, isn't he? He's like, help, I don't know. And in that moment, he's open and able to receive from Milarepa the next step. So he didn't arrive there by not engaging. He did engage, and he, in a way, exhausted himself. You know, he's obviously, you know, he obviously worked very hard each time he went off. He came back with all sorts of things that he'd noticed, but none of it helped. And that, in a way, that's what we each have to do when we read the story. We have to think, this is me. You know, what do I actually think? What do I actually find? What would I tell Milarepa? And then what? And it's not that easy to stay in that state of having let those concepts go. You know, it's easy to get to the stage of frustration and muddle, but then to carry on past the frustration without disengaging to the point where there's this kind of clarity that your intuition is telling you something and yet you can't grasp it. It's like it's a very open and important, if you like, state of mind, or if you like, it is the fundamental state of mind. But it's very uncomfortable at first. You don't feel you can rest there at first because it's so uncomfortable.
So it's necessary to go through the process of sort of like, you know, banging your head against a brick wall.
Yeah, again and again and again.
Yeah.
Just not giving up on it. Because that edge, all the time you're banging your head, you're actually showing up your old way of thinking for what it is. And it takes a long time to really give it up. You know, we can give it up. Oh, I see. So it's not about that. Okay, now I've got it. Whew, I'm off the spot. But no, actually, you're still operating as if you thought that way. So just go back into it in a very naive sort of way. I am still thinking that same way. And then notice that is my thinking, and that is not how the world is. Again and again and again, you've got to undo the habit. That's the problem. The habit is more a problem than the because it's relatively easy to see, but what is not easy to do is actually to give it up. You know, just to be for you to let it be as uncomfortable as it actually is, because we keep thinking actually it's quite a cozy way to be. Me and my world is quite cozy. So you have to keep unpicking it until you realise it's too uncomfortable. I don't want to unpick it. Ah, now we're getting closer. I actually don't want to be that open. And then you realise, oh no, I'm really getting close to it, and you have to keep going anyway till you realise I might not want it, but I don't want the alternative either.
Mm.
You know, the alternative is even worse. So okay, I do have to be that open.
It's a very vulnerable place.
Hmm?
It's a very vulnerable place, isn't it?
Yes, yes, extremely.
It is also, we live in a world when we have a social interaction and we speak with other people. We use you, me, I.
That's not a problem.
Constantly.
That's not a problem.
But yeah, I think those kinds of things when you say yourself,
Mm.
I don't necessarily have to identify with, myself with that what I think myself is.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
So,
right. That's
yeah.
right. And distinguishing them is
Yeah.
not easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
But,
Yeah.
but it's still, we still use this, and it's sometimes maybe hard to not identify that what we think about ourselves.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So that's why the path actually starts to open up as a path rather than it's just a one-shot deal. You know, oh, okay, I got that. I understood that. It's another way of knowing it's non-dual. Right, okay, next. It's kind of not like that.
It really is. It's the end of all grasping, isn't it? That's when you find the answer.
Yeah.
It really is the end.
You become your own answer, actually. You can't actually have it. You are it.
Mhm.
It's interesting, isn't it? But it's wonderful that actually there are all these great practitioners of the past who've been through this. And they say, even for somebody as gifted as that, it's going to take him 12 years. You sort of think, okay, so it's going to be a long journey, but a good one.
But aren't you in a way, I don't know, sort of, are you kind of leaving human frailty behind, and isn't that what it is to be human? Do you know, kind of it sounds a bit Catholic. I suppose there's a myriad of ways of doubting whether that's what you actually want.
Yes, I mean, I think, I've forgotten what your name is. We just said that it's a very vulnerable place. Gary, sorry, yeah, Gary. It's a very vulnerable place, because actually that's where you're most touched, because you're very open, you're very tender at that place. So maybe that's whatever it was you said was about. You don't want to not be tender and vulnerable. You don't want to be a person with no real sense of connection with anyone.
Feeling, I suppose. Yes.
Yeah. But it's more feeling. You're more open. You're more tender. You are much closer to others. You're more intimate with others, because you're now. You're not. Well, there's you and there's me, or it's all the same. There's no thought there in between. So yeah.
Yeah. I get that, but it's still a different way of operating too.
Very much so.
Yeah.
There's a huge contrast. It takes a long time. Just keep going, keep going, keep going. veering off, coming back, veering off, coming back.
I feel, that whilst you're sort of peeling back all the different layers and finding out that what you did think perhaps wasn't quite so true, and what you're finding out might be a bit more useful, and you're going through the process of experiencing all this stuff, you can have periods of euphoria and periods of doubt and all sorts of things, and it's so important to have somebody, a mentor, somebody that you can talk about and reassure yourself, and who has been through that period of discovery or searching.
Yeah, to just kind of affirm that, yeah, you're on the right track and keep going.
To feel a bit mad sometimes.
But that's why it's so important that we need to develop some kind of community or sangha sense of there's other people doing it too. There's a lineage who've done it, and we're connected to them, and we're connected to other people who are doing it. We're making these pranidhanas to always be surrounded by people who are actually supporting us in that, because that's one of the biggest disadvantages of all, is when you find you're doubting your whole existence among people who have no idea what you're talking about. I mean, it just drives you nuts. At least if you're doubting your existence among people who are also doubting theirs in a confident manner, you've got some sort of support.
What about people with mental illness then? What's defined as socially as mental illness? Do they not see that they don't have different personas then, or do they not perceive that?
I think the main problem is instability. The main problem is instability, because, you know, mental illness can trigger all sorts of insights, but the problem is the lack of stability, so you can't integrate them, and they might actually, the insight itself might scare you. So, you know, you need stability, and that's, you know, I mean, when you're given drugs and things like that, more than anything, they're aiming at stability, aren't they, so that you can stabilize yourself, you can work with your experience.
Because the social persona doesn't equate with what they think they should be in society then?
Well, that's often a driving thing, isn't it? Yeah. But I mean, there's all sorts of things that can destabilize us. And I mean, some people are actually quite crazy, but because they're stable and can manage their lives, you just leave them alone.
I think that's a lot of what social society is, isn't it? About reassuring each other that we are.
That's right. That's right.
And whether people are delusional or not, it doesn't matter, is it?
Well, that's right. If they can handle their own insanity, they're just eccentric. If they can't handle it and they're kind of causing a disruption, you know, for themselves and others, then you know, that's what you try to do. You try to stabilize
I think
them.
that's what meditation is about, isn't it? It's finding
stabilizing, yeah.
Stabilizing
that's
your
right.
mind.
That's right.
The different levels where you can.
That's right. But even meditation, you see, if you go into the meditation in a kind of not relaxed enough, or even if you are relaxed, actually, the meditation can also destabilize your whole system. So that's why the insistence is, well, you know, you really do need to have refuge, you do need to look at your motivation, you do need to have a stable attitude generally, because then when there's disturbance in the mind and body, you can just handle it, you don't panic, you relax. Because more than anything, I think when people are kind of mad, it's because they're actually panicking. Isn't it? You can have any amount of delusion, but if you're sitting there thinking, well, I've got these delusions, but I think they're just delusions. It's not, you know, you're pretty stable, but it's when you panic and think, oh my God, you know, I am being chased by demons, and, oh, you know, I have got to attack them, and I've got to kill these people because they're demons, and off you go. You know, that's when you have to be locked up.
It seems to me that there's a sort of paradox that you have to have had pretty good attachments when you were growing up, and a very good, strong, solid sense of yourself in order to lose yourself and realise you're non-attached. Maybe.
Well, sorry, can you see that?
Well, I suppose what I'm saying
The last sentence I didn't quite catch.
that there's a sort of paradox that I think that you have to have had experienced very good attachments to build your solid sense of yourself in order to be able to have sufficient stability and
I wouldn't say
to make this kind of a journey.
I wouldn't say attachments, but you do need to have built up confidence. And some people seem to come into the world confident. They go through terrible childhood, but they still have a kind of confidence about themselves. And then other people, even though they've had all the right conditions, they don't have that confidence. And when you don't have confidence, that's when you cling on to things and you hold on to things. But the trouble with that is it's only seems to be a solution. It's because if you're building yourself up on your attachments, when the attachments go, you know, it hasn't really solved anything. So it's not that you need, you know, as you're growing up, what we need really is confidence, isn't it? The right kind of confidence. If we come into the world, which, you know, as a Buddhist you can come into the world having built up confidence during your past lives, then it seems whatever life throws at you, you still have that kind of inner confidence of picking yourself up and carrying on. And then somebody else comes into this world and the slightest thing, and they've lost confidence and they become, as you say, they become attached to things. And because they haven't got any confidence, it's no use just pulling away their attachments. They've got to first be confident in the right kind of way and then let go of the attachments. If you're holding on to attachments, well, you're going to suffer sooner or later. But if you're going to help someone to let go of the attachments, you have to make sure you're helping them with their confidence. Is that more or less what you were saying?
I think we're probably using attachments in a slightly different way.
Yeah, I think we probably are.
And I think that's just because of
so is
how I think.
Yeah, is the way I expressed it, though, more or less what you were trying to say?
I think I was on a bit of a different tack, really, about something about what it takes to be able to do what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I actually think in order to let go in that way, you have to be pretty healthy. And I'm interested in what makes you be able to be in that kind of deeply healthy place to be able to do it. And I suppose in my world that I come from, that's to do with your childhood and your childhood security. It gives you that sense of inner security that enables you to let go of your attachments.
Yeah,
so I think we're using attachment slightly differently.
Yeah, but nonetheless, I can identify with what you're saying because, you know, there's been quite a lot of talk about this in the Buddhist world because people do try to practice these high insight practices or a lot of meditation or something like that. And as you say, because of a lack of security, they're actually distorting the whole practice because they're not in a healthy state mentally. And I think that's really why the Discovering the Heart of Buddhism is really trying to address that at the same time, so that first, before you even start to try to unpick things, you try to find, well, what can I have confidence in? What is there in me or about me or in my own experience of myself that I can actually have confidence in willy-nilly? And the question is, you know, do people who have had a very hard time, you know, as you say, if they've been badly affected by their childhood experiences, whether it's going to be enough just to do a course like this or whether they're going to need a lot more help, like you might get from therapists and things like that. And a lot of my students have found that they've got a lot of help from using therapists as well. You know, anything that helps, really. But yeah, and I think, you know, for many Westerners, that's going to be quite an important part of their practice. I know at a European teachers meeting a couple of years ago, some teachers were saying, well, that it has to be part of your training. You have to have some sort of therapeutic sort of work going on at the same time as you're doing your training. So I said, oh, I like it. That sounds interesting. So do we all have to go for therapy? Because I haven't done any significant amount of therapy. And then, oh, no, you don't have to. It's just certain things you need to know. So I thought, okay, well, what is it we need to know? And then, well, the person I did invite told us some interesting things, but I didn't feel that had filled that gap particularly, if there was one. I was no clearer about what the gap was supposed to be, because there's so many different therapies and so many things you could do. So yeah, I think it's a very open field, to be honest. But, I don't. There's a little formula, that you can say, well, all Buddhist teachers have to have a certain this, or this. I think it's going to be every person's got to find their own, what helps them, I suspect. Because I've found lots of things, a number of things have been very helpful for me, like doing this nonviolent communication has helped me a lot. And things that I wouldn't have picked up on, I don't think. It's made life a lot more easy for people around me, myself included. You could have carried on that way, but once you see it, you don't. And I think it's the same with these kind of personality, I don't know if you call them disorders or problems with personalities, that you can actually make life easier for yourself by unpicking that a bit. Especially one-to-one help, I think, is quite. I think that's the key to it, really, isn't it? It is each individual is going to find different things useful, because it's going to depend on who's around. You've got different therapies, but maybe they're not all available to you. And then maybe among the ones that are available to you, actually, it's the person that you actually relate to more than the therapy that you relate to that's the important point. It's a very, very interesting field.
Yeah, I think there's lots. I don't want to get diverted onto that, but I suppose, for me, it's always, there's a bit of a translation process going on.
Right.
Because you're talking about things that are also part of my professional life that I conceive of a bit differently.
Right.
And then I'm kind of trying to work it all out in my head, I suppose. But maybe that's part of the letting go.
I think that's part of the whole process. I think as Westerners, this is part of what can help us, is having these different approaches that then we have to ourselves find within ourselves what is actually helping and how. There isn't some magic plaster that's going to solve everyone's problems, because we all, as you say, we're all hearing things differently, we're using words differently, we've got different backgrounds from which we're coming from, and we have to really honour that and go step by step and dare ask our questions. Yeah.
Just like a fingerprint.
Yeah.
Unique to us.
Yeah.
Only.
Yeah. Because I was talking about this with Jonathan when we were away. He's saying as soon as somebody hears the Dharma, it's being adapted. Because it's being adapted to that person and what they can possibly understand. Until they've found something they can understand in it, then they can't engage. So they're going to understand it in the way that they can engage, and that's the only way the Dharma can ever reach us. So it is going to be, it's going to be different. Somehow seem different to everybody because of the configuration of everything that we are. And yet, at the same time, as I said, the moon, all pointing at the moon, looking as if we're pointing in different directions, but actually it's the same moon. And you can be pointing in the wrong direction. Well, that's it, isn't it? Hello?
I just want to let you know that Celia has been watching.
Celia?
Your Celia
Nothing.
from Spain.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, great.
And tagged me in. And there's Mike from Los Angeles.
Goodness, it's an
Among
international
others.
gathering. Gosh. Wow, hello everybody. I hope everybody could pick up on the discussion. Were you? Oh my goodness. Wow. Thank you very much. Well, thank you everybody. So we could finish with the dedication. And we dedicate this punya to the enlightenment of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings realize complete and perfect awakening. May the heart's awareness awaken in the unawakened. Where it has begun to stir, may it never fade, and may it awaken fully. Changes and Rimboche, Machevanam Jeje, Jevanyam Bhagavatam, Kane Kandi Bhavasho. Changes and Rimboche, Machevanam Jeje, Jevanyam Bhagavatam, Kane Kandi Bhavasho. Right, tea time. Well, we could talk about this for the rest of the year, really, couldn't we? It's been very interesting, the things he comes up with. I mean, I had a whole lot of points I might have raised. In fact, I have pages and pages of points. But maybe at another time.
No, okay. Yeah.